Okay, we are live for the, I think, the 36th edition. I might be wrong. So today's show is going to be the topic is the renewal time bomb. So to discuss that, I have Colin and Adam Towers. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
I think there was a funny post a funny comment that was put on by Fred, who's out there, of the you won't have faulty with the tower guys on there. So it was doing a play on the older Towers on. But for the audience, I've known the Colin and Adam for a little while. They're helping out in the complex area of cloud infrastructure, which they can share a little bit more. So welcome, Colin and Adam. Do you want to share with the audience a bit of background about yourself and what you do at Towers?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, Adam and I are brothers, and hence the name, Towers Associates. We've been going for about 8 years now. We really came out of a sort of a need that Adam and I both realized, having worked as large customers in enterprise and also for some of the large tech vendors, around really managing the complexity of change. And we can go into some more detail about that later. My background is being a global CTO for a large parent holding company, advertising parent holding company, where I sort of had my first experience of large enterprise change and the GSI market and some of the challenges. I then ended up working for one of those GSIs where I got to experience the challenges on the other side of the fence. And in conversation with Adam, who was having some similar stuff that he can tell you about, we realized that maybe there was a better way of doing things, and there could just be some demand in the market. Nice to meet everyone.
So hi there, folks. It's Adam. So I always introduce myself as the guy in the boiler room. It's essentially so. My role is within Towers is to look after all of our delivery. So I make sure that the thing that the customer is trying to achieve, we scope it, we put the solution together, and then I'm on the hook to make sure that we deliver the outcomes that the customers, of course, are after. My background, I've been working in infrastructure for more years than I care to share, quite honestly. But my job is all about migrating customers from one place to another, from one technology to another, rationalization and so forth. So that's kind of how Chris, we obviously got together. So as we're looking at a lot of the application and the infrastructure and how to safely plan to get customers, to a new target infrastructure or operating, mode. Of course, there is a lot of data, involved in that. So that's how we came about. Yeah.
Yeah. So the topic of today, and I was just chatting backstage with Colin about some other examples out there, but obviously VMware was purchased by Broadcom for a large amount of money, and I think since then anyone that was using that has now experienced up to 10 times increase in costs because of how they're pricing things on cores, not CPUs, or limiting number of cores, or just increasing the license cost. So we can let's focus on that one. I think maybe there's some other examples, and and the advice out there is, I suppose, it's not just for this. It's looking ahead when other acquisitions happen, what effect that would be. And I like the term you said is the change challenge is the thing, is that it's the technology is the easy part. It's how the people, process, and ability to actually be able to move at pace and change when the situation happens is something that I think is missing in a lot of companies. So do you want to touch on position?
It's interesting you say it, Chris, and it really resonates. So when I first started looking at big volume migrations, I worked within a technology business, and the technology side of things was absolutely fab. Love the business. I'll show it, VMware, and I absolutely loved working there. And when it came to the technology, it's a bit binary. It's kind of, it did work or it didn't work, and it was kind of you got to the point where once you had mapped out all of the intricacies, that became quite a predictable activity that you would work through. But in order to get the pace for these companies that really need to, some of them move quite quickly, right, because they've got compelling reasons to do so, it's less about the technology and it's more about that change activity, and it's about communications and change management and imparting trust and confidence in the business. And it's all too often there is an IT project, if you will, and the business think, oh god, here we go again. So you need to build up the confidence with the application teams and really sort of take them on the journey with you. And so that becomes one of the most complex aspects of big transformation, is about that communications. It's about managing that change activity, integrating with their with their ITSM teams and so forth. So the change is impacting up and down the stack. It's not just a technology activity. You can think, for example, if you were to move from one platform to another in terms of completely underlying technology, is your operations team, are they ready? You get down to the basics. And a lot of people want to know, well, what does this do for me? What's the impact for me? And if you don't instill some confidence in those stakeholders, then they're just going to say no. It's simple as that. You just grind the brakes on, right? So it's all about building that clarity and really getting it so it's really, really easy to describe, and then stepping people through and letting people ask the questions, because sometimes a lot of people have concerns, and sharing those out in the open and talking those through, that's fab. So yeah.
So I think the observation that I've seen in some of these, and this is one example here with VMware, but there's other situations where you've had to migrate across, maybe from Oracle have given, in fact, Oracle now increased their Golden Gate pricing to a way that it wasn't the right one because your target was no longer Oracle. So the ability for you to change something that's maybe been there, set in your organization for many, many years, maybe the documentation of the people have the knowledge of why it was there and how it was set up aren't there anymore, to go and move that from one service to another, in that example, would have taken a big planning exercise. It would have distracted the discussions and maybe your budget from something that was more beneficial for the business. But you've now either got to eat up that additional cost it's going to provide you, or then spend the time in diverting your effort and resources to building an alternative that would be cheaper. And I think this is what we're seeing here. So how are you seeing your customers dealing with the situation of getting these large increases in?
Well, I think that the first thing you should say is this all comes down to money, right? So most businesses, as much as they might have some sort of really cutting edge digital thing they're working on, a lot of the bulk of the IT heavy lifting is done at that sort of infrastructure middleware layer, Oracle layer, VMware layer. And these are multi-year long-term investments that are there to sustain and run that business. They are the engine room of the business in some respects. So often people are looking at trying to shuffle a budget around. So generally an IT department will get a fixed budget, call it 100 million a year. And they want to try and over 5 years achieve some form of transformation. There might be a large Oracle piece in that. They've got to find a way to basically make the business case stack up. So what we focus on a lot early doors within organizations is understanding the internal business case that is driving them to support that, and what is the sort of TCO level business case regarding any form of major transformation. Quite often we find that these things will pay back in relatively quick fashion, maybe sometimes within a year, sometimes less actually. So then you've got sort of 4 years of cost avoidance going forwards. But you do need to make the business case, and in order to make the business case credible, you do have to get to quite a level of detail of understanding not just the solution, but the cost of getting you there. And what we've seen over and over again is that we're being brought in at the point that somebody's already set a business case, and it's rather hypothetical or a bit overly optimistic, or doesn't quite include the full extra bells and whistles, and oftentimes doesn't factor in the cost of change at all. So invariably, the industry has lent on its, more its run mode providers, its managed services providers, and they're not very well equipped for change, not really culturally aligned for change. So it sort of gets missed. The other side, so once you come in and look at that, there can often be a slight intake of breath, but then you start to explain to them, actually, because we're going to do this with a belt and braces approach, with a focused team of specialists in this area, we can probably bring the timeline forwards. So now actually, we're starting to save you money earlier, which therefore warrants some investment, but also we can potentially do more, right? Because we can do it in such a controlled manner, we can do more than just moving something sort of piecemeal from an old to a new. We can transform it in some way. We can do some other additional benefit. And actually, oftentimes, a lot of the work we do as well has other, really important benefits in that we end up having a really good view of your environment.
Yep.
Very, analyzable set of data. And we can help you by taking the focus away from those managed services teams. We can enable them to focus on being operationally ready and excellent for what it is they're going to inherit when we complete that migration transformation.
You just touched on a point there. I used to call it lift, shift, and twist, where you just rather than just you adding some value. And the problem with these situations where you're dealing with a renewal time bomb and you're being driven by, I'm going to say, being held to ransom by a vendor, basically. That's the reason for you doing this. But you need to find some upside for it. And I think when you were saying, what benefits you go, I think it's documenting what's there. And again, go back to that point I made earlier: is people move on. I did a post about this the other day about recording decisions for architectural, decisions made, recording them as the reason rationale you made that decision, because it was probably the right decision at the right time based on the assumptions you had. But things move on and people move on. If you don't have it documented, someone walks in and go, "What the hell did? What was this guy on?" When they did this, but it was probably right at that point in time. And we don't maintain documentation or run books very well for these things, and that stifles innovation, because the ability to change quick gives you competitive advantage. And I think if you're just saying there is, if you're able to use this exercise to get some additional benefit, then next time you want to be able to change your workload to something that's more effective or more efficient for you, it's easy to do that. And there's no risk associated to it, or the risk is mitigated because you know exactly what's using it. You've got exactly the right change management processes, and you've got the right easy way of doing an impact assessment.
It's a bit like exercising a muscle, really, a muscle that hasn't been used within an enterprise, not just IT team, but the enterprise itself. Once you sort of show them that change is possible in a safe, controlled, manner, we see a lot of the times people really starting from the rest of the business sort of zeroing in on what it is we're doing and go, "Oh my God," they've actually made this. We made it quite simple. And I'm not saying we've invented a new way of doing things, but we're back to belt and braces. It's good practical stuff. It's people management. It's politics. It's personalities. It's wrapping. And that matters massively. And then it's just about doing things in a really sensible manner, well stepped through, break it down, take it easy, plan, test, communicate. And these businesses are taking these lessons and starting to apply them to other areas that we might have absolutely nothing to do with, but it's proven to themselves that change is possible.
I think the other thing that's interesting is with a lot of the mapping of what we do, Chris, it's not always just about that technology piece. So as you say, if something happens, you understand the impact technically. Yeah, absolutely. But what if someone leaves the organization? What's the impact? Where do they have responsibility for? And that has that tribal knowledge being captured, as you were saying, from those sort of architectural decisions. Is there some sort of handover? And also, do your operations team have access to that also? There's still a lot of tribal knowledge held in a lot of smart brains out there. And our job is to try and tease it out of them, right? So it's painting the picture, engaging and going, look, we've done our homework, and they, all of a sudden we turn up to, a divisional team and say, okay, guys, you've got 16 applications or whatever it is supporting this infrastructure, and you've got these gnarly databases over here, and you're segmented in this fashion. What else are we missing? And then all of a sudden they go, okay, good, you've done your homework. You've gained your stripes, and now we can have a conversation, right? So there's other stuff happening, and this is what we're doing, and future plans go here. So you have to capture all of those types of activities as well. So it's
something about, you can't improve it, you can't enhance it until you know what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I always say it's plan, and repeat plan for as long as you can, and then execute. And that's the way forward.
Yeah, and it's bringing predictability into it, and as you know, and we know, working in the industry that you have to estimate the time of doing something. It's very hard because you make all these assumptions, you don't know anything. So by having that baseline of having that information that can be easily provided when you need to make a change, it's much easier to estimate the effort and the associated risk. And so that means that when these situations come up, and you've got to migrate across, then it's an easy exercise. I've got another little thought on this as well, and I think we may have chatted about this when we had our little pre-chat that we turned into the show, because we were just all chatting about the same stuff. Was around the whole OPEX move, OPEX, CAPEX, and on-premise. So we've been living in this very OPEX focused period for many years as we've been going, ever moving more into the cloud, and that budget and money on your books of your assets of your data centers is dwindling down. It's probably a very, very small number there now, and I think that looking to the future, and say for example with this challenge at the moment, you find an alternative to VMware, you're running it on there. But later on, it may be that it's if you can port that to your own on-premise capability, it may be beneficial for you. But do you think companies are ready to do that, to invest in going more in the data center area? Is that something you're seeing?
I think the marketing job on cloud has been admirable, right? So 90% of all enterprise workloads don't run in the cloud,
right?
So you're talking about 10% of the market. We're seeing a huge increase in repatriation, from cloud, because the costs are greater than they were expecting. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes been a bit of a quick fix. And what you've got year on year is about a 45% reduction in the cost of tin and disk. If you build a data center right, a modern data center, especially for a scaled enterprise, and you make it heavily infrastructure as code, heavily automated, you really build it, learning some of the lessons from the hyperscalers, you actually find in most cases that's usually cheaper to run. Having said that, there are many reasons to go to cloud, and I think people are into this almost cloud 3.0 mode now, where they've tried it, they've seen a lot of people go for sort of everything goes to the cloud strategy, and generally that's ended up being a mistake. And what you want is flexibility. The right workload should go to the right place for the right reason. The trick is figuring out what the rule sets are. So what are your business parameters? What are your technology parameters? What are your localized parameters? And there's a ton of factors that drive that. Is cost important? Is cost not important? Is sovereignty important? And we see a lot of businesses really wanting to continue to own the crown jewels. Right? Things that really matter. Do you want that pushed out into a hyperscaler? Oftentimes the answer is no. But then there can be huge benefits in having that sort of edge reach, for some of these things as well. So there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. No one customer is the same. Everyone has a unique set of circumstances. But I think people who are still saying, well, look, we're just going to move everything to the cloud, I think that those days are probably a bit numbered. And they aren't, then they probably will be soon when they start to realize that the costs are substantially higher than they were expecting.
And I think that was a good point. The fact that we are consultants anyway. We're always going to say it always depends, but it does. And having that opportunity to again, using this VMware to actually understand your landscape and actually tag the associated workload. And it's all about that. If things are stateless or not, if things are stateless and they can all independently, it doesn't. You can have a very different architecture, and understanding the workload and patterns of your workload. I've referred to this like the metadata area. So all this data around the data about the data, the value that you can actually get from that, and understanding, the workload patterns of where they are. You're in a much better place for the predictability of if you are going to do that on-premise approach, and move that workload there. If you actually able to orchestrate and understand the workload and the patterns on it, you can be quite sophisticated, really, of where as long as you understand if it's state, what the workload's doing and where the persistence is required. Maybe that is at the end, but maybe a lot of stuff doesn't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, a lot of it is trying to find the perimeter, is what I normally call it, Chris. So, if you think, where's your center of gravity within all of your infrastructure and everything you have under your data center roof, or roofs, or cloud roofs, whatever we want to call that. Maybe there's a new thing. But nonetheless, it's trying to find the perimeter. So how can you sort of compartmentalize applications and assets and service, etc., into one thing? And then can you have a sort of a readiness plan? So, is it cloud fit? Is it ready to go? What are your available options? Can you burst quickly if you need to burst quickly? So yeah, absolutely. You've got to go through that, proper process of making sure you're taking the risk out by doing a thorough discovery and capturing that correctly. And you can only validate that through actually talking to people, in my experience. And then from there, all of a sudden you have options. But we are seeing, quite often that we might use cloud as a sort of a temporary landing spot, if you will. So, if someone wants to, I guess the VMware story, right? So if someone wants to, get away from a potential heavy license renewal, but they don't want to invest in new kit, but they also want to keep on-prem, well, you're into the shuffle along approach. And actually, if a customer wants to move quicker because they want to reduce their potential exposure, then cloud might be a fantastic tool in order to enable a customer for that. But as you say, we're all consultants, right? So it all depends. But it's a lot of cloud is a fantastic tool, is the way I see it. And if that's the end destination, then that's great. Very difficult to get everything there, of course. In terms of truly everything there.
In our defense as all consultants, at least we're able to reduce the number of the pens that are actually there. All right, so we're able to help, and and I think that's
one thing which I think it always surprises customers on a lot of these engagements. When we'll go through and we do a lot of the discovery, and we'll figure out what service, what's critical, what's running what, how they all link together, and where there's shared infrastructure components, and And at the end of the day, we have all of the assets, and we start mapping them, we match them, right? So we say, right, you lot, you're all wedded and you support this application that does this service and so forth. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't get claimed. There's a heck of a lot of stuff. And so a lot of what we're going through is actually doing quite a lot of, house cleaning, really. And we can see that, customers can realize a massive reduction in terms of, license outlay, just from rationalizing what they've got.
We think up to 10% of an estate is retired once it's fully discovered and fully understood. That's 10% off the top. And you're not doing it anyway. You're just analysing it and going, don't need that, turn it off.
It's I suppose with anything, it's always good to do a bit of house cleaning, but it's how easy it is to do. How easy it is to do that. If you're able to, use an exercise of an audit or something like that to quite easy highlight these things, and once you've done that, you can keep on top of it. You put the right things in place.
That's right.
I think any company that's been around for even a few years, or even use my own company as an example of that, is things change over times, and you don't always go back to audit why you set these things up and how long they're running. So understanding from your landscape of who's actually using it, because over time systems match the organization structure. Conway's law sort of approaches, but the organization structure moves quicker than your probably underlying system. So over that time, you'll find inefficiencies there. You'll find stuff that's no longer used. It is a very good exercise. Good old architecture 101. To the dying art of actually architecting rather than just going straight in for engineering first, which is.
Well, also, always try and help the customer avoid doing the screen test, which is switching off and see who screens, right? So let's not do that and take something very critical and sensitive out. Let's at least make sure everything that's sensitive and very critical to the running of your business, let's get that safe, let's get that banked, and then start working down through the stack that way. No screen tests.
We've talked about change isn't just the technology. So how do you see how do you see linking the technology to the business? How do we get close to the business when we're doing these things?
Well, I think it's easily answered. That the way I always phrase it when we get there, or try to, is this is a technology project, but actually it's impacting the business.
Yeah.
When we turn up, we say everything in the business is going to get touched. Therefore, everyone needs to be communicated to.
Yeah.
So what we really need in typically within our engagements is really strong top-down sponsorship from within their organization to say, okay, folks, we're doing this critical initiative. We need you to get behind it. At which point we'll go and do town halls, road shows, whatever terminologies the customers have, and we will meet the entire business. Essentially, we'll start apart from end users, of course, but anyone that works within infrastructure, within development, within engineering, certainly all the application owners, the divisional leads, and those that need to and do communicate with their end customer base, they all need to be communicated to. So actually, again, you kind of go back to, the technology becomes actually slightly the secondary bit. Of course, we absolutely methodically plan everything out and validate it and do a number of test scenarios, right? So we can fine tune our engine. But ultimately, it's only there to support pushing the business through that process. And so, we're not moving servers, we're moving applications and services.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So, I think that hopefully that's the best way I can explain it. Not sure, Cole, if you would phrase it any other way.
At the end of the day, what we're doing here is business transformation, and it sounds odd as guys who work in tech, but this is, it's about business change, not technology change. The technology change is there for a reason. It's enabling something else that's happening higher up. So I think we start a lot of our stuff engaging with what's the case for change from the business. What's the thing that is driving this? What's the compelling event? What's the the need? And it might be save me money, make me money, get me out of trouble, or some other sort of thing. So it's funny. I think we miss how much our mindset is that we're not just technology. And one of the things that we see that goes wrong so often with big technology companies is they bring in these teams that are like migration teams or transformation teams, and they just think it's a technology exercise, and they wonder why it keeps failing. But it's hard to educate that. You can't really train that. You've got to start off with an approach that understands that you are not just doing something behind the scenes with technology.
Yeah, and I think the point, I think it's spot on. And the point Adam made was having that directive from the CEO of why you're doing this, or being mandated, because I think everyone has a bit of change fatigue in organisations. They've been here a while because someone's come along and said, "Oh yeah, we're going to solve this," and they haven't lived up to expectations in previous ones. So they've had we've been here, seen it, heard it all before, and I think that's always a risk. And not saying that's been the reason why they failed in the past, because they haven't had engagement from the business, because they haven't been bought into it. But it's probably a factor. And maybe the first time it wasn't that one, but the next time it could be, because that team doesn't want to get involved because they've already done it before. Look at my notes last time I spoke to the other consultancy company, and
there are real problems in our industry. the large consultative businesses run on hypotheticals, and they run on really pretty decks that sort of stack up against a Gartner type scenario, and it's very much devoid of that customer's real world. And then you've got 70% of IT projects failing, very well documented number. And I just think there's a real problem in the industry in setting out the right level of detail to a business case supporting a change agenda that is more than just consultative talking points, and the ability to execute on where I want to get to, which is not well serviced by the people that are really designed to run this stuff at a low cost price. So and our industry is littered with failure. 70%. Where else would that be allowed? So I think businesses are starting to expect more. Technology is becoming more and more critical. It is something that is enabling things to happen and transform radically in the world. It's becoming so critical, and it's almost like it now has to be taken seriously. And change. Everything we do is about change. And I think we're going to see quite a revolution in this space. And I think we've got a lot of big things going on in the world. The renewal issues with Broadcom, the business case for cloud potentially changing. A lot of M&A activity in the market, a lot of geopolitics is shifting around the way businesses are structured. Driving for efficiencies as we're coming out of a rather tricky period globally. And I think we're going to have a really busy period for change. I think we're going to have to address it, and I think it will be forced to be taken much more seriously.
Yeah, and it's an interesting stat there. 70% of IT projects. I know in the data world, it was a very high number, but it's coming to the data was the bad on the naughty step a bit more than the rest of the IT, but they're pretty much the same. The same level of success to failures. And you've touched on. I've got some views on why some of those things are. I think the approach from the large GSIs are used to do these things. It's more the marketecture, not reality. And I think
the GSIs are great. And they should do what they do, what they're great at.
Yeah.
And consultants are great, and they should be great at being a consultant. But there is a big gap in the middle, and the consulting industry has been trying to move down into the managed services industry, and the managed services industry has been trying to move up into the consulting space, and so far that's not worked very well. I think specifically with data is an interesting example, because data is one of those things where it's all about servicing the business, right? It's all about providing insights, intelligence, other higher end data science type activities, predictive analytics, now AI, formerly known as machine learning, but the business consumes that. You're doing that to support an advertising agency, client teams, account teams, sales teams, media planning, buying teams, the finance department. They are the consumer. They are the people that say, I want this thing. And you've got to work very, very closely with them. And then there's a huge amount of organizational change that goes into that, not just which should start right at the start, and it should provide the business with the capability to be far more efficient and reactive where it needs to be, and strategic when it should be. And it requires a vast amount of engagement with the industry. Just building something and hoping they'll come to it, that doesn't tend to work very well.
No.
So again, it's slightly back to an organizational / change communication management issue, but starting at the start and then seeing it through to what is hopefully a well-maintained and operated and innovative and highly efficient and super accessible data platform where you can start layering AI on top of it so people can talk to it, and it becomes even more accessible again. And that's really the power that will be gifted from AI in that case.
Yeah, and I think it's you brought some few things you brought there. I think that's that move between those large, the big four trying to move into the managed service piece, and the likes of us trying to move more into that consultancy piece. Not being, I suppose, from my point of view, is I think we're better positioned to go up to go up into that consulting thing, because we can actually glue the two things together better. I don't think that those large organisations are quick enough that they also the large ones are actually able to get the reality of what's really going on to link it into their proposals.
I think it's very attractive to go to a one-stop shop. And there's a phrase that Adam and I have decided we will not use, but I'll use it as illustration, which is one throat to choke, right? And you tend to go to these large, very, very large multinational organizations that have a practice or a team or an accelerator across everything everywhere. And it's easier for you. You can contract one person, you've got one person to hold responsible. You've got one throat to choke. I think that the future really is about specialists who are really good at their area coming together in this single hand to shake approach, right? And actually, Towers Associates is very effective at working with our associates and our partners and operating as one. So we give the customer one hand to shake, not one neck to throttle, right? And I do think that as technology and the importance has gone up and the cost base around using a lot of offshoring models has also shifted against that model. And as technology is maturing, frankly, quality is a better thing over quantity in every measurable way. Quality, time to implement, price to implement by the time you factor in getting it done. And I think there's a huge growing market again as technology gets more and more shoved into the fore, and people are getting a bit sick and tired of the old approaches to this stuff. That I think people like us coming together, providing the right answer, but in a collaborative fashion that therefore the customer can consume that service. It is kind of, well, as an ex-CTO, it's definitely what I would want.
Yeah, it's spot on. I think collaboration between specialists that actually have got how we work very similar to you guys as well. Is we've got demonstrable patterns of how we do these things. So we're not just coming in with a theory. We've gone, look, we've done this before. This is how we do it. Build on top of that. We'll extend it for you, but we'll give you that assurance that we've done this. We can demonstrate we've done this. We'll give you the trust, and then it's much easier to deliver based on that approach and be successful and be part of that help to raise that 30% of the success is
yeah, I mean we will guarantee you're not in the 70%. We will not be happy if you're in the 30%. We want you to be in the top 5-10%.
Yeah.
I think to your point of in terms of everyone's unique, right? Everyone's a unicorn, and being able to demonstrate you've done this before, that's key, right? Because it's building that confidence from the offset. You have to do so. And what we find is we have a lot of we have a really good, rigid, rigorous methodology and framework that allows us to ensure that we are stepping through all of these activities. And we constantly refine this and update. But what we find is we can turn up with 85% based on the business case, where they're at, where they're trying to go to, some of the factors that are a part of that scope, and start stepping the customer through that, essentially workflows, but enabling them to answer questions at certain key points and explaining what the implications of their answers might be. So then we can model that as we go through. And I think that's really, really key. And that's technology, change, comms, it's the whole kit and caboodle. So yeah, it's really key to be able to, bring something templates. I don't think it's really templates so much. It's a baseline. And then from there, we've got different components that we can then bring in, which in themselves are matured little components that we can add and then start talking through. So really important to be able to aid a customer in terms of building their own bespoke view of that based on what they're trying to achieve, and doing so quickly. Because that's the other thing. As much as we ask for sponsorship from top down within a customer's organization, it is always also that top down who are saying, come on, let's go, let's get going. So we have to play that sort of, we're building the machine and we've got to do this steady and safe to take the risk out of it. And we've got some low hanging fruit so we can build some volumes and so forth. And then that same thing that we were creating with the customer, You just keep going back to it, and keep error handling it as well.
Yep.
Quite key, which is where we go through our processes. And it's a bit like saying, you want to plan if you're here and you want to get to B and everything goes your way. That's typically how people plan. Well, what happens if over here something goes wrong? What do you do in that scenario? Do you keep moving forwards, or do you have to back out the whole thing? And that's really key to be able to, through any different juncture. And I'm not speaking about any particular part of a transformation journey, because it's relevant to all of it. What do you do if something doesn't go your way? So when you've got those flows created, it's quite an interesting thing to work through with the customer. Say, all right, well, what if we don't get the additional capacity? What if the networks are unsure, or what if a change is rejected? What if an application team pull out? What if there's a divestiture halfway through? Or an acquisition, or so you keep going through the what ifs, not endlessly, because obviously that's just asking a little bit long of the tooth, but to a right level of degree, so you can still move forward even in the face of change not going your way, and that's key.
Yeah, but is it a reaction time? I think you touched on that. I've talked about competitive advantage. Competitive advantage has a value to it, and having that ability to be able to stay ahead of your competitors, is a lot of time down to your ability and speed and confidence in actually making changes that support business initiatives.
So it also is about quickly getting businesses to the point where they have those solid, strong foundations. And then an effective sort of operating engine room, they can go and do those wonderful, brilliant moments, and and they've got the agility to react. And it's when you're wedded to something that is dragging you backwards or holding you down, which is
storm anchor
language or whatever, but creating a lean, fit business that has got all the right elements to be able to respond and beat its competition. The companies we deal with are mega enterprise organizations, and inherently larger tankers. Tanker ships takes a long time to turn a tanker.
It does.
The trick is to add a few more rudders to it. Or take the weight out of top of it.
Some side jets or whatever.
Turn it into
jets.
and take it, because obviously we started this one. We're really looking at the VM acquisition to Broadcom. But there's been one recently that went through. So IBM just recently bought HashiCorp. So HashiCorp is what's used for storing all your secrets, and it's used everywhere, all over the place. So I'll be interested to see. One, I'll be interested to keep an eye on what are the alternatives for that, because I'm not going to say is what they did to Cognos is where good products go to die. So what I used to say about Computer Associates is where good software goes to die. I'm not saying IBM's been got some great stuff, but
IBM are a good organisation, right? But it's always interesting when you talk about these large acquisitions, because someone's gone and built that business and grown it, and they will have now. IBM will have waved a big enough price in front of their face that they, and or shareholders, and so they've gone in, they've jumped all in. We'll go into IBM. Businesses when they join large businesses that size, when they join large businesses, usually are left alone for a small period of time. The first thing they then try and do is cross-sell, upsell across the organisation, and it kind of gets starts to change out the top middle management. Usually at that stage as well, year or two down the road, people's earn-outs are sort of kicking in, so people are all the talents walking out the door that grew that thing in the first place. So I think it's usually about 3 years in that these things start to struggle. But also you buy businesses because you buy a market, you buy an audience, you buy a ready-made, contract.
That's the value you've got. That's how they.
Actually, this is a good acquisition for IBM. It makes sense. These are this cloud readiness landing zone stuff. A lot of people jump to cloud and they never build the thing right. It was never ready. So there's going to be a big push in that direction, and it will it makes sense. But there will be the usual challenges that any organization, HashiCorp size, goes through being acquired. And in many ways, VMware being Broadcom acquiring VMware is a similar exercise. It's been tough for people on the ground for a year in that organization.
Yeah.
And it's having ramifications, but nobody really noticed it for the first year.
Yeah. Very good. Very good observation. And I think the other one, and time will tell whether IBM changes their licensing one that makes it. Hopefully they won't. I hope they're more integrity than some others, but and hopefully they're going for the upsell, not more what I call the asset stripping one, where they're just putting the prices up to go and get better bang for their buck. So the other interesting one was Salesforce was looking to buy Informatica, and obviously that one's now it's not going ahead. They had a big spike in Salesforce's price after they announced it, but then obviously it didn't go ahead. So I mean that's an interesting one to look at, because I think Informatica has been privately held for a little while recently, so I think it's not even floated. So
there's been a couple of very large acquisitions or sales in this space. Sort of the APM, then obviously infrastructure. It became there are a few movers that sort of gobbled up large market share, and a number of them have got for $1 billion up in the last couple of years. It's surprising, really, because once you start to dig behind the scenes and see what they really do and how they work, they're just doing a good job of presenting your own data back to you. So.
It'd be interesting to see what the next ones, the next acquisitions are in that space. And I suppose the advice, and I think probably the CTOs or anyone looking after your budget is, whenever you're estimating stuff, always have that unknown factor when you know that there's some sort of purchase happened recently, because you may need to pivot, and the way of allowing you to do that is understanding what your architecture it looks like at the moment. So if you are able to ever, if you is a need for you to move to pivot on something, it's a painless exercise, and it's not going to go and sideswipe all the other great projects that you've already got planned, because you're able to react quickly.
I mean, it's almost business continuity planning on a different level. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Always prepare for be prepared for the things that might happen to you, that never, no matter how unlikely. And I think with the Broadcom piece, no one ever thought that they would come in and do what they've done to the way they commercially operate. So it can happen. And I think the same with hyperscalers. Do you want to have a bit of diversification here, chaps? The big challenge with sort of cloud is how native do you go, or how specific hyperscaler native, because you get a bit wedded. You're in a marriage at that stage, and you're probably sticking the stuff that's really, really critical and really complex up there, because you've had to go through a massive re-architecting exercise to achieve that, and it probably works brilliantly and it does things that you couldn't do. But you do have to start looking at it as from a business perspective. There is risk associated with that.
It's looking at that containerized ACE and sort of containerized approach with Docker and things like that gives you the flexibility. I remember when back in my old days of briefly as a CTO and the VP of engineering, but it had a bigger remit than just a data thing. It was do we go AWS Gateway? Do we go Kong? Do we go some of the other ones that are out there? But do you host your own rather than be tied into those ones, which means you could move it across to AWS or to Azure. You could go dual cloud. The reason
customers do hybrid cloud. They do a mix. The large enterprises, most of them, and I remember being a customer and getting heavily courted by Microsoft. It just became immediately apparent that they were just trying to lock us in and get us so sticky to them that we couldn't go anywhere. And frankly, that's what hugely turned us off. We became very alarmed at the approach.
It's very much something I see Microsoft really acting like Oracle used to back in the day, where it was sold at that top level, and decisions were overruled. We bought it all. I've got all the software I need. It's everything all you can eat with Microsoft. That's it.
And you could consider it, and it worked great. But is that the right thing to be completely reliant on one customer who may or may not choose to take a different commercial strategy at some point?
We had one customer, and I remember at the time thinking it felt like overkill, but isn't hindsight an interesting thing? And they were implementing a strategy called 4+1, and essentially it was using 4 of the different hyperscalers plus on-prem.
Oh, really?
Really interesting, a mega-sized business, all over the globe. So they had to use multiple hyperscalers just for the the available regions as well, based on customer base and so forth. But they went to Ali Cloud, Google, Azure, and AWS, as well as had their own on-prem, a number of on-prem sort of strategic hubs, if you will, and that was all focused on portability. But the thing that actually, I guess in hindsight, that became the most interesting bit for me from that side was it was commoditizing the hyperscaler, which I thought was quite an interesting drive, because actually it meant that it was kind of the opposite to the lock-in. There was significant enough business there for all of the hyperscalers actually, to all eat rather nicely and thank you very much. But of course, always wanting more. It was quite an interesting program that actually, because you start sort of going about it, and actually, Chris, that would have been one which would have been fab to work with you guys on, and the LEIT team, because data was a massive part of that. Because you can start getting things portable, and yes, you can spin things up and whatever else, but the data is the thing that starts to become rather interesting in that situation. But
I like that concept of spinning it back round. It's like, okay, so you're making them all compete with each other to drive down the price, because you've always got your on-premise one. I briefly did some Alibaba stuff. Actually, it was just the similar sort of reason. The company was a global company, not a large one. They had that ability. They had to run in China as well. And I remember going down and speaking to Alibaba, and we were looking at all of their APIs for the different things, and we realised that they just put the extra letter A next to everything pretty much. So it was S3, all the stuff for S3 was SA3 for all the commands. Everything the same as API, and then pretty much the same with all their API gateway or something. Oh, that's a very easy change to go and make from it. It was pretty like for like, but it was interesting architecture to put together something that can work across multiple clouds. And to that point of that persistent thing is working out what you'd had to have. What could be localized, and then what would have to be centralized to bring all that data back together. So I think we're coming close on time, but I think just the other one I think I'd seen, and again I think it's the same answer for all these problems is Cloudera and both Databricks have got to change some of their licensing things. So always be on the lookout for these activities that are happening in the market, because it can really affect you.
You might find procurement people start to include certain clauses.
Yes. Yeah. It might be a good bit of advice for contracts and commercials.
I bet we know. That is already the case. People are trying to now cover themselves, in all which ways they can, and that is legal, contractual, commercial.
That's a really good advice for when negotiating any renewals. Putting in some caps and things like that to prevent.
The problem here is though, if you were to try and give yourself some protection, you're going to do so for a number of years. 3 years, something like that. It depending on the complexity of the size of your organization, if you need to get away from something that is so ingrained within your organization, you can take that long. And that's not typical for us, right? We're looking to get things done an awful lot quicker than that. But some of these, as Colin said, these are big tankers, very heavily loaded tankers. you know, and turning these things is a very difficult challenge for themselves. You know, with all of the consulting support and the operational hands they're ready to receive, you know, there is, you know, potentially these. If you're thinking of you know, making a transformation, you should start, you know, and you should start by doing your discovery, get yourself ready. So if you want to be able to, you know, commit and do something, then you can. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Very good advice. Yeah, the ability to react quick is going to be company's superpower, I think. Yeah. So I know you guys are going off to a conference soon. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join you on this one. But do you want to share where people can meet you? Maybe at that conference, or where they can follow?
We'll be in sunny Barcelona, May 21st to May 23rd for .next, Nutanix's .next. If anyone's out there, we'd love to catch up and say hello and have a beer.
Excellent. And if anyone wants to find you, what's the best way of catching up with them or getting in contact with you?
I mean, please look us up on LinkedIn or online, towersassociates.co.uk, or please email me or Adam directly if you'd like, colin@towersassociates.co.uk and adam@towersassociates.co.uk.
You keep it nice and simple with the first names there, and
it's one of the co-founder benefits.
Yeah, it is. Well, we could go that one because we had two Chris's, so yeah, so we already had to go. Well, yeah, I suppose just wrapping up. I mean, yeah. So the advice, some good architecture practice is what's always needed. So thank you for your time today and talking about how we can insulate ourselves from these potential time bombs and react quicker to help benefit the business. So yeah, thank you both for being on. I suppose my movements. Where am I going to be? Yeah, I'm back in London. I think towards the end of the month, 17th. We'll have our normal meetup. So hopefully I'll see some of the people in London then. Till then, I'm in New York. So anyone wants to reach out and catch up, I'm normally about on Wednesdays over here in the city. So, all right. Well, we'll call that a wrap. I can go get some food. I'm really hungry. There you go.
Appreciate it.
All right. No problem. Great chat. Thank you very much.
Bye.